Is the thing that surprised you the most from our presentation, and then also what the top priority is. We really want to hear from you what we need to focus on for future meetings, and note for your calendar, and we're going to mention this again later on. Next meeting is November 14th. So now I'm going to pass to Michael.
Yeah. Hi, how you guys doing? Our biggest thing that was the biggest surprise and we want to know more about is the modernizing of the classroom. We're a little surprised that's actually the biggest we're surprised that's the biggest focus of everybody, and that's you get the architects working on that. Our biggest concerns was the graduation rate was a big concern of ours. Only 36% of the kids feeling that they belong in the school today. We think that's a major concern. It leads to lots of other problems. What is the Learning 2025 network? The motivation of the children to actually want to do these accelerated programs, and why are they important? And the vagueness of everything. We feel like everything's talked about in broad strokes. That was one of the things that came up. And then early reading intervention. We think that should actually be in all the schools and all the grades, starting at a very young pace. And then the stress and anxiety level of the students. We think that we need to do something to make sure the students want to be here, and no transparency with that part.
Thank you, Mike. I'll take your
Hello. So our biggest surprise was that the presentation seemed like a lot of the activities are focused on the grades 10, 11, and 12, and we felt that it really needed to start earlier, the elementary grades, because once you get to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, it's kind of a little bit too late. So we want to see it starting earlier with the younger kids. And we were wondering too, with the surveys, how many kids actually participated, how many kids got asked to participate, and then how many participated, so how many surveys were done. Our biggest concerns were transparency, and that we felt that there's a great deal of communication from the district to parents and families, but there's not enough communication between the actual schools and the parents and families, especially in middle school and high school. And our issues and topics to discuss, we're trying to improve communication between the schools and families, and how we promote respectful conversations between students, between parents, and between the district and the schools and the families. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David. So our biggest surprise, or a few of them, were the amount of abilities that the students are able to get in terms of their learning, either creating their own education, co-authoring their own education, and then how many kids were felt underrepresented through these surveys. And then the biggest concerns was sort of tied to those things too. If you are creating your own type of education plan, how is this actually being measured in terms of scores, readiness for actual graduating and the future, and also just general safety. Social and emotional safety and well-being was talked about a lot, but general safety wasn't mentioned at all during the presentation, and I think that was a big thing that came up in our group. Yep, so similar to some of the other people, measurement of test scores and transparency into what test scores are and what our kids are being learned or taught, and then safety.
So at table 1, we had a few faculty members and we had parents, and so I don't know if our discussion was a little bit different. We didn't really have one particular biggest surprise or concern. We had a lot of different things we talked about. There were some surprises about the numbers with demographics, like the percent of underprivileged students in the district. The fact that 1 in 5 kids don't feel like they have an adult to talk to. And then in general, we were talking about the number that was given about the algebra regents and how kind of the contrast between old style standardized tests versus this new vision that Arlington has for being more life ready. So I think the number that was given for the percent to pass the algebra regents was a big surprise, and that led into more discussion about, is that a concern that standards have been lowered, and how does this all fit into our new vision for how we're directing students? Like other groups, our big concern was really communication. How can we improve communication, even around things that might seem smaller, like that number for the Regents exam. So I think those are the big ones.
Thanks.
Hi, at table 2, our biggest surprise, there were a few that came up, but the one that seemed to echo the most was sense of belonging. And there is a little bit of variation between the lower grade levels and the higher grade levels. It's nice because at our table we have kind of another broad spectrum. We have some faculty members, we have some parents, and even a father that doesn't have kids in the school anymore, but did before, but he's active in coaching now. So you get a good spectrum, and it's a good group. Looking at that, and really when we started to open up about concerns, that's really where it drove the discussion. And our concerns really drove the issues and topics that we put together to discuss and prioritize. Technology was one of the ones that was the one that really stuck out the most for us. What does this new plan look like? Will technology take away from or interfere with the human connection that the kids are getting? A lot of the concerns really kind of tied together. That technology concern also comes along with communication. Where, are the parents going to be updated frequently on what this looks like? How is this project going to be administered? Parents need to be involved, teachers need to be involved, administrators need to be involved. There's a lot of us here that are stakeholders. And also social and emotional learning and connection. For the transition after COVID, once the COVID stuff has stopped, now the kids are back in school. It may be a little easier. I mean, for my kids in particular, I have 2 in elementary school and 2 in high school. The high schoolers took it a little more in stride. The younger guys went back to school and went, wow, okay, this is different. So it's something where there's a bit of a disconnect there that needs to be looked at. And socially and emotionally, they need to learn how to get back to normal. Inclusion and opportunities for involvement. That goes back to our surprise on the sense of belonging. When you take a look at the opportunities, I know it had been mentioned a couple times, the AP courses and things like that, kids not thinking that they're able to take those courses. Everyone's included in that. It's your education. You should be aware of what your options are, and it should be driven and at the forefront that you have the opportunity to be whatever you want to be. You just have to do it. So that's what we've come up with ours. So again, number 1 was technology. Number 2 was social emotional connection. Number 3 was the inclusion and opportunities for involvement. Number 4 was communication. But all of them really are just working in concert together to make us all better.
I'm Ron. We worked at table 7. We had a couple students.
Put the mic up a little.
Well, we had a couple students from the school here, so that was kind of illuminating. Our biggest concern was that students disadvantaged or of color did not feel that they could take AP classes. We were surprised at that. That led into one of our issues, which was how to elevate those who do not feel comfortable into getting into higher level classes. And our biggest concern, we actually had a number of concerns. We had a long discussion on this. One was engagement with the community. There was concern for the implementation of the plan that was presented, what the timeline was, what the cost was going to be of it. And then there was communication from the school in real time, from the administration, in real time with the students and the parents. That's it. Thank you.
My name is Tim, and I'm representing Group 5. Similar to the other groups that spoke, our biggest surprise and our biggest concern both centered around students feeling a sense of belonging, especially students that are underrepresented. And we felt that it was important to kind of look at when that is happening. Is that happening more on the secondary level, as far as middle and high school, than the elementary school? And where is that change happening, and why is it happening? And just some of our discussion with the lack of sense of belonging, some socialization topics that we discussed as well. Cell phones obviously is a big part of students' lives. Does that take away from the opportunity for students to socialize if they're always on their devices or some other type of technology? What supports are we giving students as Arlington develops an MTSS model? What are the tier 1 supports that all students would have access to, and how would belonging be utilized in that tier 1 support? And if students need a tier 2 or tier 3 support, what are those supports going to be so that all students feel part of our community? In addition to that, we talked about class size. Obviously, a sense of belonging is important, and the large class sizes can impede those relationships. Time constraints as well, especially at the secondary level. Students come into the classroom, they immediately have to sit, get their books out, and start learning. So there's not an opportunity to develop relationships during class time. So how can we kind of look at that as well? We have a couple members of the community that are going to share their talents that are maybe retired and want to give back. So can they come into the building and be mentors for students that might need it? Other people that might have time during the day to share their talents should be welcome as well. And lastly, students that are gifted and talented are often forgotten. So how can we make sure that we are pushing those students to meet their potential as well?
Hi, my name is Ed Halsey. I'm representing team number 9. Our biggest surprise and our biggest concern overlapped, and it revolved around equity or lack thereof in issues of academics and being inclusive regarding all students. Being that it was our biggest surprise and our biggest concern, we actually went about and made a list, and our key question is, how will the district address all the equity issues such as learning outcomes, college preparedness, building conditions between all the buildings in the district? They're different from one side of town to the other side of town. The academics in the buildings are different from one side of town to the other side of town. Data collection, discipline and conduct, the feeling of well-being, inclusiveness, transparency and communication, which other groups have mentioned, safety, bullying, abuse. Those are common topics, but there hasn't been anything that really talked about addressing those in terms of equity. We also talked about what is the district's vision and how to bring forth the student of the future, which will also, as they're using the terms, increase agency and participation. So we're looking for their vision and their communication in terms of agency, initiative, and student ownership of this school. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Basso. I'm here representing table number 10, last but not least. Some of the biggest surprises, we really had two. One being the sizable budget that we have. Is one surprise, and the second is the kids, approximately 80% of the kids do not feel connected, which is a large number, but yet there's still 20% that feel that they are not connected. So there was a bit of a surprise with that. Leading into the concerns is touching on the budget, how are those funds allocated across the district? We really need to know the details. Devil usually is in the details. What are we also doing for that 20% of the children that do not feel connected in our schools? A lot of the items that we brought up in discussion as our concern group were covered by most of the other being last, of course, that happens. One of the highest areas of concern and topics is the belongingness and wellness. We want to ensure that affirming our cultural identities for the children. And this really leads to what is the long-term plan? How are we going to really enhance the belonging and wellness for our children? What is also the data with regards to the equity teams that were put together? We really haven't seen any resolution or any information from that. Another high concern, of course, is the academic growth and success with personalized access opportunities for our children. For example, each of the schools have a parent advocate. So there's some questions surrounding that. as well as starting languages earlier, and having more options for that. The elementary kids aren't accessing any other languages than their primary at present. A medium concern is the fiscal and organizational management. Part of that goes with facilities. There's differences with the buildings, of course, and improvements with some of the futuristic learning classrooms that we would like to see. Some of the slides are very, very nice. As well as what are we doing about the overpopulation, right, in the classroom size? We know some of the schools are busting at the seams. Last but not least was securing the entrances and keeping our kids safe. One of the final and low, I guess we'll say, risks or items here is the bus schedule, the schooling and bus schedules. Is high school starting too early? Question mark. And also are there after school buses and transportation for those children that have extracurricular activities that have no way of getting home? So thank you.
Wow. Thank you all so much for all of that input, all of those topics. We're going to be meeting as a committee between now and November 14th, and we're going to be taking all of that information that you shared with us, and that is going to be our framework for moving forward and for the discussions that we're going to have with all of you. November 14th, please, 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 come back, bring a friend, bring a neighbor. This is how we are going to make the change. Communicating with each other at these little tables, reporting back. We're listening. So please, bring your friends, bring your neighbors, and we will see you all November 14th. And thank you so, so much for coming out tonight. Thank you.